and welcome to the national debate. I'm Madhavdas G. Viewers, the 1st of August isn't known to be an important date in history as such, but Donald Trump has changed that. The US president has signed an executive order that imposes tariffs on a majority of the countries that US trades with. While the order will come into effect only from August 7th, Trump says that he was doing the same thing during his first term, but it was not noticed. This time, however, Trump's latest antic is not being taken as seriously as his previous actions. After all, the US president had threatened to make the world pay on April 2nd itself before pausing his decision as the global stock markets, including the US's, saw a massive fall. Trump, in his desperation to conclude a trade deal on terms that favor him, is specifically targeting India and making us, of course, pay that much more. Now, let's quickly introduce our guests who are joining us for more on this. Right here in our studio, we have Ajay Dua, former Secretary of the Ministry of Commerce. Joining us with us also is Vijay Sardana, Senior Economist. We have Lieutenant General Sanjay Kulkarni, who's a defense expert, joining us. Ravinder Sachdev is a founder president of Image India Institute. Let's also introduce our guests from outside. We have Matt Klink, who's a Republican strategist. We have Dan Geltrude, economist and founder and managing partner of Geltrude and Company. We have Nikita Menkovich, who's a director of the Eurasian Analytical Club. Peter Kuznick, author, is also with us. Now, why is this so significant? Let's take a quick look at what really has been proposed. This is the vicinity of the tariffs that are being imposed in India's immediate neighborhood. India is at 25%, Pakistan at 19%, Bangladesh at 20%, Sri Lanka at 20%, Afghanistan at 15%, Indonesia at 19%, and Vietnam at 20%. China talks are still going on, though there is some initial agreement. But what really is happening in this particular case? The dead economy, the argument that has been made, just take a look at some of the biggest economies in the world. The US is at 2.8%, China at 5%, Germany a 0.2 minus or negative growth that's being seen over there, India at 6.5%, and Japan at 0.1%. So which really is the dead economy amongst these is something that needs to be seen. Of course, the volumes are there for us all to see. The US and China clearly much bigger economies in that sense. But let's quickly open this up and take it across to our guests joining us. Let me start with you first. Mr. Ajay Dua, somebody who's served as the Secretary in the Ministry of Commerce, you are perhaps best placed to look at what's going on. Is this nothing but saber-rattling, threatening, all of the dramatics that we see before Trump concludes any deal? Or is he serious this time around because of the kind of statements that are coming in? What do you gather? What do you reckon is happening?
Now that I'm out of the government, out of the Ministry of Commerce and Industry, I can talk a little more freely and say I hope President Trump is not being serious, because I have no access to government information at this point of time, and I would like to, but I do hope that what he's proposing to a lot of countries across the globe, that these are what they call opening gambits. And once he has seen the reaction, some places the reaction will be loud and aggressive, combative. Some places it will be muted, but yet a degree of disappointment. I think between these two categories, most countries of the world would fit in. After all, till President Trump came into power in, say, his first term, US and, well, I would say almost till the second term as well, the US was the epitome of free trade. That meant very few duties, and encouraging the world, other countries, and taking the lead at the WTO, the World Trade Organization, saying remove the barriers to trade, including the non-tariff barriers, and let's go forward. Right now, I think two things seem to have perturbed him. One, his country's huge GDP debt, the debt to GDP ratio.
Right.
That's bothering him. How do you go about servicing it? Could there be a default? Because the moment that happens, the dominance of the dollar could also
We're going to come to that point. I think those are very, very important points that we have to discuss. But let's start with what's happening at the moment. And let me bring in fact, Matt Klink. Matt Klink, the question that many are wondering here is that whether Donald Trump is serious with this 25% The immediate neighborhood of India sees a much lesser tariff. India, of course, tariffed at much higher. And is this nothing but a bargaining tool that we're looking at the moment?
Well, for those of you who have followed Mr. Trump, I can tell you this is an opening gambit for President Trump. And the 25%, from the conversations that I had late last night and early this morning in America, this is a starting point. And look, Trump is the negotiator in chief. He's willing to sit down and negotiate a better deal. But I think that at least it's a starting point, and I think that it's also a recognition by America that, with all due respect to what your last guest just said, free trade works when the deals are free and they're fair. American presidents, both Democrat and Republican before Donald Trump, had cut a series of bad trade deals. And frankly, we had a massive trade deficit with the world. And Trump is determined to close that. He's determined to remove non-tariff trade barriers on countries. So the 25% trade barrier with India is certainly a starting point. Look, I do think with your large economy at a 6% or 5% growth rate, whatever that number you put up, that's certainly impressive. I think that, Trump may impose this, but India doesn't have to accept it. They can always negotiate a better deal. All right. And I'm confident that can be done.
All right. Let me come across to Mr. Vijay Sadhana on that point. The fact is that for US, India is perhaps 10th or 11th in line in terms of the largest trading partners. They have many other countries ahead of India. For India, US is the largest trading partner. We have to accept that reality. So there could be a hit as far as our GDP is concerned, as far as our economy is concerned. What are the options for India if this does happen? And in terms of actually allowing for a little more negotiating room, what is it that India can do to perhaps sweeten the deal for the US? Because we've clearly mentioned that agriculture and dairy are no-go areas.
See, we have to understand the global market first. Today, the world trade is about $24 to $27 trillion. What is India's export? India's export in goods is about $450 to $500 billion. What is export to America? Maybe $80 to $100 billion. Now, in front of $24 trillion market, US is just $100 billion. I think it is not a time for India to worry. Only point is that we have stopped exploring the rest of the market. Somehow we are trying to put all eggs in one basket, and then we are crying that somebody is shaking the basket. I have told from day one very clearly that Trump is going to be in a different term altogether. India has to find out alternate market options. Opportunities are huge. Only thing is we have to put our house in order, our quality systems, our production systems, our manufacturing efficiencies, and audit the outdated laws which are adding transaction cost and making us inefficient and slow. If we just put our housekeeping in place, I think we don't need America. If today's the volume is the benchmark, $100 billion is not a big deal. World is looking at India. Whole lot of Africa is there, East Asia is there, Middle East is there, Latin America is there. In fact, today Canada and Mexico is there. So leave out America for the time being and look at the map, rest of the world, and there are huge opportunities for Indians. And that is what we have to look at it. As far as Trump is concerned, he badly needs India. Let me explain that as well. Biggest problem for Trump is why he is still talking about India here and there, trying to put pressure on India, because he is facing pushback from China on agriculture products. China, which was buying a whole lot of agriculture commodities from America, shifted the contracts to Argentina and Brazil. Now, China was a huge dumping ground for agriculture commodities of America. Suddenly, if that is blocked, you can't find any other country in the world other than India where he can dump all his agro products. Because all other are island countries, maybe 2 million, 3 million, 5 million population. That is not going to solve his problem. So he is desperately looking for alternate to China to dump his agro commodities, and that market is only India.
Right.
That is why India is bothering him so much that somehow he wants to enter into Indian market because that is his politics.
Right.
Like in India,
Right.
agriculture is a political problem for us. Same thing, agriculture is a political problem for him in America.
Absolutely.
So here, tussle is between who will blink first. Mr. Modi will compromise on agriculture or Trump will compromise on agriculture.
Let me bring in Dan Gertrude on that. Dan Gertrude, I think that's pretty well explained by Vijay, that there are domestic compulsion when it comes to agriculture, and it's probably true for every country in the world because it is a significant chunk of the population, either which way you look at it, however industrialized the countries may be. But the point is there are certain no-go areas here in India. When we talk about agriculture, we talk about dairy, GM foods, or even, the fact that cows are fed food items which are strictly not considered vegetarian, and there are, issues of belief over here in India. It's not going to be easy to get India to budge and allow the whole market to be opened up. There will be certain amount of accommodation, but that's something that a middle ground will have to be found out for. This kind of pushing and shoving will perhaps not be the most optimum when it comes to such issues which are so sensitive in nature. Dan?
Well, here's how I see it. If you look at how President Trump negotiates, he's a pretty tough negotiator, at least when he comes out initially, and that's what we're seeing right now. What I do believe is going to happen here is ultimately Trump and Modi will get to the table and negotiate, and that is what Donald Trump's MO is. He wants to sit down and make a deal. Now, let's keep something in mind in terms of not just Donald Trump, but politicians everywhere. What are they primarily concerned about? Getting reelected. Donald Trump is not looking at that right now. He's termed out. So this is his last chance to set things straight. So he is not going to act the way a normal politician would act because he's not going to run for reelection. So I believe he's going to be tough in negotiations. Is there going to be some give? Yeah, I think it's in everyone's best interest that the United States and India come together as allies. As was just brought up, the real nemesis here is China, not just for the U.S., but for India and the rest of the world as well. So for the U.S. and India to strike a fair deal, and fair deal means a level playing field, would be to everyone's benefit, and I think we'll get there.
Okay, and let me bring in fact, Ravinder Sachdev on that. At some point of time, U.S. will have to take a call on what its strategy for Asia is. Does it want India to be a counterbalance for China or not? Does it want India to be a market and increase trade and defense ties or not? Because this kind of positioning, this kind of public posturing, calling India a dead economy along with Russia, that's certainly not going to cut it, and that's led to a considerable amount of outrage here in India. I mean, I know Donald Trump is a plain speaker, but these kind of comments, many say, reflect very poorly on the last 30 years, which it's taken from both sides to build on a bilateral basis the relationship between the two countries.
Thank you. So true. So much true. There's a lot of heartburn also, I would say, in India amongst a lot of folks. But let's say a few things are real. America's average weighted trade tariff before Trump came to office was 2.5%. Now when EU gets at 15%, EU has a sigh of relief. Only 15%. That 15% is still 6 times of 2.5. Plus, EU promises to buy American oil and gas for $750 billion, I think, and EU companies to invest in America $600 billion, one or two. Total $1.35 trillion. EU promises it will buy and invest in the US and pay a tariff of 15%. That's what Trump is doing. So whatever it be, Trump is drawing in money into the United States. That's a fact, right? Now, how much it succeeds in terms of geopolitics is another matter, because this will have an impact. The more Trump and Europe, in a sense, the West, pressure the rest, the more the rest will seek ways to confirm their sovereignty. Now coming to India, yes, we will, whatever it be, even if it's not 25, it's 20. And remember, our penalties are also padded with 2 extra elements. Buying Russian oil.
I'm going to come to that. Yeah.
And BRICS. But by the way, today India has stopped buying Russian oil as of last week. There are reports. Yeah. So India will
The government
adjust.
doesn't confirm that. Those are independent reports. But let me quickly bring in fact, Peter Kuznick on that. Peter Kuznick, the point that I was just making earlier is this, that at some point of time, US has been following a certain trajectory and it comes to a certain amount of stability when it comes to international relations in terms of what it wants or expects from India, particularly when it comes to Asia. On the one hand, you have Quad, where you're supposed to be partnering, when it comes to strategic issues. On the other hand, you have this kind of rhetoric, which many would say is far from diplomatic and not expected of President Trump, and certainly has taken a lot of people by surprise here in India. So what are we looking at in terms of the relationship going ahead? Because while India hasn't made any public official commentary or statements on it, the position is very clear that we will have to look after the interest of the people of India, just as President Trump is doing for the people of the United States.
Donald Trump's economic policies, his trade war policies, contradict America's strategic strategies and policies. He's going after Taiwan. He's going after India, countries that the United States needs for its broader security interests. Trump is a very different kind of politician, and his understanding of economics is very, very simplistic. He thinks if the U.S. is running a trade deficit, that other countries are exploiting the United States. His new policies are going to be a tax on the average American of $2,400 a year. It's going to have a devastating impact on American consumers. But he doesn't care about this. The big concern, the big issue in the United States has been Trump's support or covering for the pedophile Jeffrey Epstein. 24 hours a day in the news, it's all about Jeffrey Epstein. Trump is trying to distract. This is Trump's way of doing things. He hasn't been able to deflect attention from that, but now the discussion is going to be about the trade wars. This is going to have a devastating impact not only in the United States, but globally. But India is very important in that regard. India is a great country. India is now the world's 5th biggest economy. By the end of the decade, is predicted to be the 3rd biggest economy. To seeing Modi grovel to Trump the way he has during this first term and the beginning of this term is very distressing. India's got to be the leader of the global South. In 1991, the G7 countries accounted for 42% of world economy. Now that's down to 17%. It's the global South and Asia that is emerging.
Well, Peter Kuzik, I have a little bit of a different point of view there, because India is doing anything but groveling. It's certainly not towing the US line, and that's perhaps what's leading to this kind of frustration. Major Khudkari, you want to come in on that? Because there's also, of course, larger strategic issues that we are discussing. Groveling is certainly not the best way forward, best thing one would say, because there have been so many rounds of negotiations. India, one of the first countries to start the trade talks with the United States, but the fact that we haven't been able to arrive at a deal shows that India is firm about a few things at least.
Madhav, thank you. I think at the very outset, I must say both America and India are the 2 largest democracies in the world. And there's one reason why, even in India, slowly and steadily, one was looking at the Americans as good friends, and we were able to carry on with the strategic partnership for a longer time. And one of the reasons why then suddenly the Indians also would feel it's better to be with the Russians than be with the Americans, because the Americans can't be trusted. Because this kind of a behavior definitely leads to bad blood. And that's very important for anyone to give a statement, because India is a vibrant economy. India's dependency and our own self-sufficiency, moving towards Atmanirbharta, the ability to absorb technology, the ability to be able to move, English being a language which we both understand, and that's the way to go forward, and that is how it was. Just see the equipment, just see the military equipment that is coming into India from America. Huge amount of investment India intends to do, $200 billion in the next 10 years. Most of it would have gone to America, and it will still go to America. But of course, we also mustn't get emotional. We know what the president is all about, and the way he speaks and the way he goes about it. Not take him too seriously. He must be wanting to needle India, not realizing India is an old civilization. And we are also sensitive, rather hypersensitive to these kind of talks coming from the American president or from America. I'm sure the citizens in America don't talk the way Trump is talking about it, but definitely I think it's very important at this point of time, because even for textiles, that's one thing. If you have Bangladesh and Vietnam having lesser tariff than India, we suffer in textiles. But when it comes to pharmaceuticals, if it comes to energy, or even if it comes to the aspects of electronics, you find there are virtually no tariffs. Virtually no tariffs, because it's 25% tariffs for all other. Agriculture, yes, huge, 64% tariff. It's non-agriculture is only 9.2% tariff. 9.2. That's peanuts, if you ask me. So the Americans mustn't get extra, after all, the farmers in India also have to look after.
I'm just going to bring in Nikita Milkovich in a minute. I'm going to request you to stay with us because I quickly want to bring up the next points, and these concern Russia particularly, and also, of course, what the larger issues concerning these trade and tariffs are concerned. This is, of course, as far as India's oil imports are concerned. This is the percentage of imports from Russia is at 35, Iraq 19, Saudi at 14, UAE at 10%, US 5%, and others at 17%. So a lot of dependence currently on Russia that exists. What else do we know as far as India's relationship with Russia is concerned? Arms purchase currently highest from Russia at 36%, France next at 31%, US at 13%, although that number has been growing over the last decade and a half at least, Israel at 11% and others at 9%. But what about the big elephant in the room that we saw others speaking about, including Secretary of State? This is what we're talking about. Let's quickly bring up the next set of graphics in terms of the purchase of Russian oil. This is where the question arises. Now, on the one hand, you have Russia, which of course is exporting 733 million worth of crude to India, and this is used to create products for the US. India then exports oil worth 1.2 billion euros to the United States, and this is estimated as being the refined from Russian crude, and that is further sold to the US. So it's not just the US, there are other Western countries which are also buying crude from India, processed or refined oil from India in that sense. And that's what leads many to ask the question as to whether this is nothing but hypocrisy. And Nikita, I want you to come in on this, that even though there may be sanctions, ultimately, if the Western countries are buying the same oil which is being refined in India, then they are the ones who stand to gain from it.
First of all, thank you very much for possible of visiting your show. In my honor opinion, you should understand that Mr. Trump just wants to change international market. So-called global trade and global trade rules are over. Mr. Trump and United States government want to rebuild United States economy. They want industry back from the foreign countries to United States to make more working places for the American citizens. It's absolutely logical demand. And Mr. Trump, of course, need to make tariffs higher to take the industry back. Because if they are low, it is easier for the companies to produce goods in India, in Taiwan, in other countries, and import it to United States.
Right.
Trump wants to change the situation. If you see deals with other countries, even Mexico, which is a neighbor of United States, an ally, in fact, it's under control of the Washington government. But they have 25% now. And Trump declared that he is ready to make 30% or more for this country.
Okay.
It means that, of course, you can run, you can dance, you can sing the song, but it will not change what Trump wants to make.
Right.
So I think that the Indian government should do the best to avoid any kind of United States control and threats.
Okay. Let me just quickly bring in Mr. Ajay Dua on this. Mr. Ajay Dua, the point is this, that, even when the war happened, when all of this repositioning happened as far as where India purchases its oil from, the logic given was this, that if nobody purchases that Russian oil at the end of the day, then the global oil price then rises. So it is a win-win situation currently for the Western countries, including the United States as well, is what we were told for the last 2 years. Why has that logic suddenly been turned on the head?
I think the background is geopolitical in nature. President Trump had hoped to be the mediator in almost all the wars going around the world. He had, if you recall, during his election campaign, talked of stopping the Israeli invasion of Gaza and bringing the two sides together within 4 days. He talked of putting a stop to the Ukraine-Russia conflict. And at neither place, in neither of the two wars, he's been able to live up to what he had hoped for, what he had envisaged, including probably a Nobel Prize for Peace. That seems to have, the disappointment which is there is reflecting large. For after all, about a month ago only, not too long ago, the gentleman from the United States, we have 3 of them here, would bear me out, that he had said, within 50 days I'll have this war end. And that's the statement made last month. Now, otherwise, he'd put in this time saying he will leverage tariffs, trade, even vis-a-vis Russia. Now he's brought it down to 12 days. And probably 3 days gone, it might be just the next week. So the fact is, he's taken on India, because he's upset with India also. I would use the word peeved rather than upset, I hope not upset, about our contradicting him, including in the Indian Parliament, about his role in mediating between the India-Pakistan's recent conflict. So having said that, he's now using, if you recall the timing, after he put out saying that 40 days or 50 days he will end the Ukraine-Russia war, he talked of a 200% duty on people buying oil from Russia.
Right.
And so that included India. I'll just take a second on that. Now he's using that against leverage against India because, one, we've not given him the credit which he wanted for the stopping of the war. Second, he thinks that India takes too long to negotiate its deal. It had a leverage over others which it's not exploiting. If we keep on pointing out our red lines, agriculture, dairying, GMO and others, he also does need to as a politician. He may not be looking at re-election because of the constitutional reasons, but he also has to do something for the electorate.
Okay, so let me bring in Matt Klink on that. Matt Klink, here's a multiple choice answer for you. What's the reason for all of this? You know, is it really the India's refusal to acknowledge Mr. Trump's role, President Trump's role in negotiating a ceasefire, and that's been denied in our parliament? Is it, for instance, as Peter Kuznick suggests, a diversionary tactic from what has happened as far as the Epstein files are concerned, which is causing a certain amount of consternation back home there in the US? Or is it other factors and inability to deliver on the promises that have been made on stopping wars globally? All of the above, one of the above, what's your answer?
I'm going to take letter D, the one that you didn't suggest. Now, look, I think that there are a couple ways of looking at this. So from a domestic consumption, which is where the overwhelming majority of Americans are focused, is for all of the sky is falling chicken littlers out there who said that the tariffs were going to lead to runaway inflation, higher prices. I mean, the $2,400 per American, that's a completely fictitious number. It's made up. It's total bunk. So, but what I can tell you is that the U.S. economy is growing strong at 2.8 to 3%. The stock market has reached record highs. Unemployment is low. The U.S. economy is incredibly strong. So from a domestic consumption perspective, the American economy has been righted after 4 years of just horrific economy under the past administration. On the world stage, again, from the domestic perspective for America, Trump is seen as fighting for American values, standing up for the largest market in the world, and not signing bad trade deals, which have been historically signed by the U.S., and running a humongous trade deficit. So I think on that perspective, again, positive for Trump, positive for America. In terms of how Trump looks specifically at India, I tend to look at it as I use the meeting with Modi in the Oval Office that he had earlier. They're two valuable trade partners. They're two valuable allies that need each other. India, as the world's largest democracy, is important to America. Trump just wants to drive a harder deal. And I think that he didn't say that the 25% is chiseled in stone. He did say that this is still open for negotiation, and I think it will be. Clearly, there are some sticky issues with agriculture, with dairy, with GMOs. But look, ultimately, I think that Trump wants to negotiate a deal. So continue talking to him, and you'll get something that's better than 25%.
Okay. Vijay Sadhana, I want you to comment on this. While everything might be open and it might be still on the table, there are questions that many are asking. You know, why does this BRICS currency, for instance, rattle the US so much? There are many observers who say the dollar is perhaps not doing so well as it has been over the last 3 to 4 decades. But is all of this also the subtext that you don't want to see other countries come together and perhaps threaten the dollar and therefore run down India and Russia's economies, say that they are dead economies? Is that part of the larger rhetoric? And that's really what it's playing over here as well.
It's an important point because if you see what was happening in the world economy in the last 30 years. 30 years ago, the world trade in dollar values was about 90-95%. Right now, the global trade in dollar terms, or I will say underwriting of dollar, is something about 55 to 60%. And in next 10 years, by 2035, it will be 40%. Now, what is happening, unfortunately, the bossism of America was because they were trying to use the dollar as a weapon. Weaponization of dollar was the threat to any country, whether it's Iran, Russia, India, we will put sanctions. Minute dollar is out, your whole game of sanctioning and bullying around the world is out. So you are looking around the world helpless because there's nothing you can control. You can't start throwing missiles everywhere. Easiest thing was you block the payment systems, you block the dollar, and rest of the countries have to fall on the knees. This is going out of hands of America. This is rattling the whole American administration and policymaker, including the corporate giants sitting in New York, those who want to control the global economy. Now, this is not just a political, it has a bigger deep state agenda. Now, considering this, if you look at classic example is the BRICS declaration in the 31 pages. One of the classic document, you read the whole 31 pages, you will find systematically it is actually puncturing every agenda what Trump is trying to push. But they have not used the word dollar at all in 31 pages. So what is happening? We will promote trade in local currencies. We will go for bilateral enhancement. We will support each other in economic growth. Everything possible. They are technically saying we don't need US in the world economy. What is the role of US today? If you look into, the growth is in Asia. Future growth will be maybe in Africa if the natural resources are properly exploited. Critical technologies today are controlled by China, part of them Russia. India is putting efforts in R&D and innovation. So the hegemony of the West is slipping out. This is making them extremely uncomfortable. Now somehow they want to grab it back. And that is what I'm saying, that Emperor Trump is in a hurry to claim the glory of the world. He wants his face on the Mount Rushmore. Please appreciate this. And this is what is going on. That is why imagine a president himself is asking, give me Nobel Peace Prize. Have you ever seen any person demanding prize for himself? So what it shows is that this is a last term. He has nothing left in politics after 3 years. So somewhere claim a glory in the world history. And that is what I'm saying. He is in a hurry. But unfortunately, he lost the direction and the plot. Okay.
Let me bring in Peter Kuznick on that point. Because Peter Kuznick, I see you're smiling over there. Rushmore dreams, worries about how US's role in the global order is perhaps coming down. What's really driving all of this? Peter Kuznick.
Trump is a megalomaniac with fascistic political tendencies. And so he's driving this extreme agenda that makes no sense from a global perspective, makes no sense from a U.S. perspective. These are the highest tariffs that the world has seen since the 1930s, since the Smoot-Hawley tariffs. And he's going to drive the world into, it might not end up in a global depression, but he's certainly going to be hurting people around the world. It just doesn't make any sense from an American standpoint or a global standpoint. As the previous speaker speaker said very astutely, the United States' hegemony is not as strong as it used to be. But the United States is desperately trying to hold on, which is why it's so important for India to act as a leader of the global South. He mentioned about the BRICS countries. BRICS is what's rising, but what is necessary is that India has got to repair its relationship with China. The United States can still play a positive role. The United States is a very dynamic country with a lot of great workers and technology, but the United States cannot dictate to the world. When Trump tries to dictate to Brazil, for example, about putting the fascist Bolsonaro, not prosecuting him, or his trade war with Canada. Why is he so mad at Canada? 1% of the fentanyl comes in from Canada. Yet Trump, because Carney has been standing up. That's why it's so important that India stand up. You can't capitulate to a bully. Okay. You have to stand up to a bully, and India is in a position to do so. And that's what the world needs now. The Europeans caved. We've got a lot of countries just caving into Trump, but the world has got to stand up to a bully who's trying to impose this very, very harsh, repressive, regressive regime on the world economy.
Okay, Dan Gertrude, I want you to come in on this because there are 2 or 3 very important points. A, of course, respond to Peter Kuesning saying that there are countries that are standing up to a quote-unquote bully, as Peter Kuesning calls it. And B, the point is that if you end up with this kind of rhetoric and this kind of hard positioning, you could very well end up pushing India into the corner of Russia and China. And that's certainly not something that the US would want on a long-term perspective after having invested so much in the India-US relationship.
So what you see here, and I think it's quite evident as you hear each of the guests express their opinions, Donald Trump is a polarizing figure. I mean, it's just the nature of his personality, and what he does is always going to be highly scrutinized. Now, I believe that the United States, although not in a perfect financial situation right now, remains in a strong economic position. There's no question about that. I mean, I think everybody wants to do business in the United States because of the economic power. It's the world's largest economy. So with that said, Donald Trump is looking at this and saying it should be a fair deal across the board. And mind you, if Trump is successful, and we don't know how this is all going to play out with all these different tariff situations, but if he's successful, although he can't run for office, his policies will stay in place if he is successful. Right now, a lot of people did say, yes, all this tariffs and trade wars is going to bring down the U.S. economy. It's going to put inflation at the highest levels ever. None of these things have happened so far. It doesn't mean they won't happen, but if they don't happen and Trump is proven to be successful to Americans with these policies, you will see more future politicians in the United States adopting those policies internally and externally in the United States.
All right. Will that happen? Won't that happen? We don't know at the moment. We'll have to, of course, wager a bet on that. But let's take a look at what we do know in terms of the facts, in terms of what really India has drawn the red line on. We've discussed agriculture, of course, which contributes 60% to the economy, but a huge chunk of livelihood for 50% of the population. And that's why we are looking at how US imports could drive local prices down, and that's not something that's very good. We've already seen that the sector out of trade, which deals with other nations, and clearly dairy is another very important part. It contributes 5% to India's GDP, and at the same time, it's a livelihood for about 80 million in rural households. So a significant chunk there. India adamant on certification of US products. They're also saying a complete no to products from cows that are fed meat. And that's certainly a very, very sensitive issue here in India. Let's take a look at what really we're looking at the Trump tariff tirade, whether it's really going to backfire. This is the impact that we are seeing in terms of the United States. The impact on the dollar, it's down 10.8% since the start of 2025. Inflation, 2.7%. in June, May 2.4%. Vehicle prices 0.9% rise. It's the highest since February 2024. This is the kind of impact that we're seeing as far as the US economy is concerned. And let me take this back to Matt Kling. Matt Kling, you were the one saying that the US economy is doing very well. These facts which I've just highlighted are speaking quite to the contrary. And the impact that these tariffs could have on the US, it could perhaps boomerang on the common man in the United States. At the end of the day, the common household in the United States is what some estimates say.
Look, ultimately, you're right. That's where I think that not only Donald Trump, but the rest of the Republican Party will start to pay attention. To date, we haven't seen that. So, look, you can quote those numbers. I can tell you right now that wages are up, that inflation is low. The cost of consumer goods, they made a big deal, about the cost of eggs skyrocketing. The cost of eggs is down. The cost of gasoline is down. If the American consumer starts to feel the pinch, then Donald Trump and the Republicans will certainly feel that come the 2026 midterm elections, where the entire House of Representatives and a third of the United States Senate is on the ballot. So right now that hasn't happened. And again, there have been those, frankly, in the mainstream media and on the left side of the aisle who have been saying that the sky is going to fall, that the world is going to tumble into a global recession. None of that has happened yet.
Okay.
So again, you can keep saying the sky is falling. Keep looking up, because it hasn't fallen yet.
All right, we'll wait and see what the final impact is. Rabinder Sajjan, do you agree with that? That this is all just, doomsday predictions, that we'll have to see how things finally fall into place once these tariffs are in place, because they believe that will not just bring industry back to the United States, but will also benefit America. Whereas there are others who believe it's the common man in the US who's going to end up paying a lot more in the form of these tariffs.
Both ways, America could end up to be a golden America and continue if Trump succeeds. If Trump fails, America would be a train wreck at the end of 3 years. Stepping back, as to America. See, the tariff philosophy of Trump and his advisors is that we will collect tariffs. And their estimate is, if it's 20% tariffs averaged out, that means $6 trillion collected over the next 10 years. So that money comes into the government kitty. Now, Trump looks at this money and says that, okay, the industries which are hurting, you mentioned car loans, right? What they're doing is offering interest-free car loans. Okay, so subsidies to industries like steel production, but who consume steel like aerospace, automobile, they will suffer subsidies given to them from this kitty. That is the strategy of Trump to manage the inflation within America. Now, one thing which he needs in order for this model to succeed is low oil prices. Okay. Oil constitutes, or transportation, about 25% of the logistic cost, right? Oil stays down, tariffs they collect from the bag pile, they give some subsidies to interest groups, farmers be it, workers, car loans, etc., and they manage. Now, that's it. We were talking about, the world order, etc. My next book is about what I look at the world today. It's a new world matrix under construction. So what is happening after COVID and Russia-Ukraine? World is realigning flux. I was in the SCO summit of media and think tanks just last week for 10 days in China. Countries are talking, absolutely yes, that American behavior or American policies are pushing more and more of them to, okay, on the one hand, they all want to and will make some deal because that is with America. But they're all increasingly, urgently looking for newer partnerships, supply chains, cultural connects, etc. And so would India be also doing. So the world is definitely in this new world matrix which is out there, forming into blocks. The one last thing, what America wants, what Trump wants, is the #1 empire to stay the #1 empire. China is #2. America has now decided, I will never let the #2 become the #1. So that is the friction there.
All right, that's where the friction is. And let me bring in fact, Lieutenant General Kulkarni on that note. Lieutenant General Kulkarni, what exactly are we looking at India doing from here on? India so far has said that we're going to stick to our guns. But the point is that where does India and where will India be able to accommodate where, we are looking at US? You've already mentioned defense as one of the areas where we have been changing the patterns, but it cannot change overnight. And that's something that, our US panelists would do, or even perhaps the US government would do very well to understand that we still have over 50% of our hardware from Russia. We can't we can't just wish that away, even if we want to or Mr. Trump wants to.
See, all said and done, it's not just imports and exports. There's so much of America in India, so much of America in India, which the Americans must understand. It has nothing to do with import and export. One, in the process of making America great again, America mustn't destabilize the world. Ours is a very vibrant economy, growing at almost 6.5%, and it'll grow, and it'll further grow. To call it a dead economy is making enemies in India. You can't make enemies in India. We love America, the Americans love Indians. We are the two largest democracies in the world, and therefore it's very important, as I said, it's not import and export, just $100 billion, peanuts. But there's so much of America in India which people probably don't realize it. Right from morning till evening, they are either eating, writing, thinking, drinking, everything is all American. And therefore, I think it's very essential for America not to weaponize trade. Because the moment weaponization of trade is done, we will have blocks how to counter America. The aim now is if America is number one, it must remain there as number one. And if China is expansionist, there are groups to counter China to not to be an expansionist. Now there will be groups to counter America as not to be so selfish. So because America now needs to take everybody along. It's America which made Europe. It's America that made the Southeast Asia. It's America that made Japan. So America is responsible for these economies the world over. And hence it is very important at this point of time not to be seen as anti-India or imposing tariffs, needle India, try and get to Pakistan, cryptocurrency, looking at rare earth minerals, looking at all kinds of things, family business. It's America. It's America and not Trump. We are not looking at Trump towers. We are looking at the United States of America. That's very important, and that's how it should be seen. And I hope the government of the United States of America sees the world as one and not as different and just wanting to be selfishly growing, which is of no use. And India is a vibrant economy. America needs India more than India needs. 98 nuclear, what happened? 1% that was the GDP of ours, we were dependent on America. Didn't matter at all. Today it is 0.1%. It doesn't matter at all. But it's important that the two countries must progress together and work together.
Let me bring in our guest from the US on that. Peter Kuznick, your response to that?
I agree that the United States has got to look at the world as potential allies rather than adversaries. And that's not the way Trump looks at it. The United States has benefited more from the global economic order than any other country. This has been since World War II. The United States has been the hegemon, the dollar has been supreme, and the United States has benefited. But the world has not benefited. Right now we live in a world in which the richest 6 people have more wealth than the poorest 4 billion people. India is a rising country. China has eliminated much of the poverty, the extreme poverty that existed there for decades. But the world is changing, and the United States can either be part of that change in a positive way or try to deter that change. Trump's attitude, his mentality is an 18th century worldview at best. And so Trump does not understand the economy. He claims to be an economic expert because he's a billionaire. The reality is that he inherited $490 million, that he went bankrupt repeatedly, and that he's not an economic genius, he's an economic imbecile. And this policy that he's pushing now is only going to hurt the world, much like his Doge policies were based on cruelty in the United States. His global policy is global cruelty. This is not going to benefit American consumers or global consumers. It's going to hurt everybody, and it's important that the world stand up to this kind of idiocy rather than kowtow or capitulate.
Let me quickly get Nikita Menkovich on this. Nikita Menkovich, what's the role that Russia can play in such a situation? Because many also believe that it is the Russian-Ukraine war that is also putting a lot of pressure globally, in terms of a lot of aspects, not just supply chain, not just fuel prices, but also, ending that war is something that could potentially benefit, not just Europe, not just US or Russia, but also the rest of the world. Nikita.
Russia-United States relations means not much in this situation. As I said, all this escalation, economical escalation, is up to Trump. he wanted to change the United States. The first attempt was by Mr. Biden. He tried to solve United States problem by attacking Russia and Ukraine to make Russia and Ukraine American colonies. It didn't work. They are losing. So they tried to play all these economical wars. And I want to underline, you shouldn't pay too much attention to United States threats. When Russia-American conflict started years ago, a lot of people in our country was afraid how we're going to do with sanctions, how we're going to do with tariffs. But now, in 2025, I can tell you, it was easy. Nothing really have changed in our life. It means that our government, our business, as the India business also do, can change the model of economy.
Right.
It can change partners and find new markets. It can solve the problems without United States. If United States, Washington, Trump want to be aggressive,
all right,
you have no choice but to choose another adequate.
All right. Many questions there. In fact, a lot of answers that are still awaited. But let me thank all our panelists for joining us. Ajay Dua, Vijay Sardana, Lieutenant General Kulkarni, Rabinder Sajdev, Matt Link, Dan Gertrude, Nikita Menkovich, and Peter Kuznick. Thanks so much for joining us on this edition of the National Debate.
The News Hour at